Okay, it might be someone's favorite time of the week again. It's Ask a Rabbi Wednesday. Our friend James Gosnell on Facebook, he asked the following question in comments to last week's video. He said, what is the definition of Chasidei Umos HaOlam, which means the pious of the nations of the world? He brings several examples of different ideas from various achronim, various later authorities, and their opinions of what it means. And then he goes on to discuss the issue. So he mentions that Rav Soloveitchik, I'm not sure which Rav Soloveitchik, I'm assuming, I'm not even sure which one. He says that this is a Nachri Chosid on Ba'ones, that he is a pious Gentile. HaOlam means a pious Gentile who is under duress, and this is what James Gosnell is bringing, meaning due to the neighbors around him, whatever, he's under a certain level of duress and is not responsible for perhaps idolatrous things, but he is still a pious individual. And then he brings from the Chabad, the Mittler Rebbe, who says that Chasidei Umos HaOlam come from Klipas Noga, which is an intermediary klipa. It's something that's this is not what James is saying, but the definition of Klipas Noga means something that's I guess we could say parv, something that's neither good nor bad. It's neutral and can be turned around one way or the other. However, they do have a connection to God, and they do receive reward for their good deeds. James then asks if I have Satmar, and he wants to know what's the Satmar view. And then I bring some answers, and then he reflects on that. So this whole question of am I Satmar and what's the Satmar view, I'll have to defer to not only one of the greatest rabbis in our local county here in Sullivan County, New York, but one of the greatest rabbis we have in America today, Rabbi who was a student of the Satmar Rav, and yet he does not use he certainly dresses Hasidish. He dresses like the style of a Hasidish Rebbe would from Hungary, that according to those traditions. And he's a tremendous scholar, a tremendous Talmud Chochem, and a very pious individual. And Rabbi Leibovich was interviewed this last summer around the yard site of the Satmar Rav. And the person interviewing said, here you are, you were a student of the Satmar Rav. What would be the Satmar view on various issues, facing us today? What would be the Satmar Rav's view, and so forth? And the Woodridge Rav, Rabbi Yitzchak Leibovich, Shlita, he says that's a ridiculous question to ask. And I would really like to maybe make another video discussing this more in length, and perhaps even just reading this interview, which was written in Yiddish and translating to English, just for the benefit of the many people who might watch these videos, because he really captures the essence of what Yiddishkeit in general is all about. He said, Satmar is not a movement, it's just the name of a town where his Rebbe, who he learned Torah from, once served as a Rav, but it's not meant to be a movement. It's not meant to be even like we say Chasidus, this and that. It's a community. We have these communities today, which I love very much, identifying like this. But Rabbi Yitzchak Leibovich very strongly brings out, and I think very beautifully and very accurately, even how dyed-in-the-wool Satmar Hasidim who consider themselves, who would label themselves as Satmar Hasidim, I don't think would really disagree at the essential points that Rabbi Levovich is bringing here. Is that, it's not about a movement. It's not about particular party lines. Just simple, plain old Judaism. In the old-fashioned way, the original, faithfulness to Torah, and that's it. So Samarov wouldn't say. He said, "Why do you?" He said, Rabbi Yitzchak said, "What the difference does it make what the Samarov's view is on an issue? What's the Torah's view on an issue? What does the Chazal say? What do the Rishonim say? What do we have in the Chumash, in the Navi? That's what the question is, not what's the Satmar view." And so, too, I would say, as far as this question, and also just like Levovich, who was a student of the Satmar, he could certainly call himself a Satmar Chassid, and yet he refuses to do so. So all the more so, I, who had no connection until later in life and didn't grow up there, and I love the Satmar community very much. They embrace me very much. They're wonderful people. They're very charitable, very loving people. And although, yes, my family in Europe came from the town of Satmar, part of my family came from there, and if you go back far enough, they were Rabbanim in Chenger and Krula, which are towns very close to Satamare, and within the greater Satamare area, which is more or less like a county as well as a city, just like there's New York City and New York State. And so Satamare is, there's a city in Romania, and then the greater area where these cities, Chenger and Krula, where my ancestors going back 200 years were Rabbanim there. But that doesn't, when my family came to America, it was before Samarov came, was even Rav in Satmar. So, my grandfather was born in America here already. His parents from Satamari. My great-grandparents on my mother's father's side. But that doesn't give me the right to call myself a Satmar Chassid by any means. I never learned there, and I never, although I have a great admiration and respect and love for them, which maybe other folks might not share, but I certainly really have a tremendous love for that community, and they've embraced us, and my children attend their institutions, and I love them for that. Now, so as I said, if it doesn't matter, and I think we'll have to make another video addressing that at another point. But back to Rabbi Gosnell's question. So it's not a question of what the Satmar view is of Chasidei and HaOlam. What's the Torah's view? Now, there are many different, as one of my friends, Rav Ariel Bartzadok points out, there are chilukei deos, there are many different opinions when it comes to how we define Chasidei and HaOlam. But there are two general ones that we can find in the Rishonim that I think are, clear. The Gemara does say Chasidei and HaOlam yesh lam chelik olam haba, that the righteous of all the nations have a portion in the world to come. Now, the question is, how do we define the righteous among the nations? Now, and essentially, we find in the Rishonim two pathways, which I think are possibly both true in a certain sense. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. The more famous one is that of the Rambam. The Rambam says that if somebody has a devotion to Torah, he says, that a person who's not born Jewish has a choice. He may convert to Judaism if he so wishes, but he's not required to. If he doesn't wish to accept the whole yoke of all the 613 commandments, he could accept the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, the 7 laws of Noah. Now, it's really not a comparison of 7 laws versus 613. It's because each of the 7 have many different, details which can be compared to the various mitzvahs that we find in the Torah. In a way, it's almost like comparing the 7 laws of Noah to the 10 commandments. The 10 commandments being binding only on the Jews, and the 7 laws of Noah, which includes some of the 10 commandments, but also includes some things which are not in the 10 commandments, being for the Gentiles who do not choose to convert to Judaism. I was taught in yeshiva by my Rosh Yeshiva, Moshe Lazarus Shlita, who was a student of Victor Miller, and also he learned in Torah Vodaas and learned in YU. And Rav Lazarus said that there's no inyan bisman for people to keep Shabbat mitzvahs b'nei Noach. That if someone believes in the Torah, it's much better, and l'chadchila, the ideal is that they should convert to Judaism. And he brings many reasons for that, and again, we can talk about that in another video. And Rav Lazarus, very interestingly, holds that conversion to Judaism is the ideal, that the best thing which is something that most people would find shocking. Most Jewish people say, oh, we don't proselytize and this and that. And when I asked Rabbi Lazarus this, I said, well, why does everyone, this was so shocking to me when he said this. I was probably 18 years old, and I always heard differently, and I was very interested in the Noahide movement. And I said, why does everyone else say differently than you? And he said, well, you got to ask everyone else. I'm saying what I'm saying, and he had his reasons, which were very convincing. and that's it. Essentially, after learning more, and I clarified with Rav Lazarus about this years later, and he confirmed that there's certainly not a sin to invite non-Jews to convert to Judaism, as long as they're going to be frum. It's the best thing for them to convert, which a lot of people, again, will find rather shocking, as far as his estimation, and his arguments do make sense. And the whole argument that it's harder to convert than not to convert is he actually blows that out of the water. He proves that really no, it's harder actually in a way to keep the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. Again, we could talk about this another time. However, certainly we cannot deny that the Rambam holds that there is an inyan of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, that it does have halachic validity, although some might say that it's only in the realm of Agadata, not in the realm of halacha, and others would say that it's batal and it doesn't apply today. It only applied at a certain time and no longer applies. And just because the Rambam codified it doesn't mean that it applies today. It's not mentioned in Shulchan Aruch. So again, there are various approaches that we can discuss with this, but in the end, let's look at what the Rambam says. I don't think the Rambam would disagree that there might be an ideal for a non-Jew to convert, but he says that but it's his choice. That's the point. It's his or her choice as the non-Jew whether they want to convert or not. And so the non-Jew who does not convert but believes in the Torah and keeps the Sheva mitzvos b'nei Noach is called, in the Rambam he says, Chasidei Umos HaOlam, he is